When I first opened the email, I wasn't prepared for what I was about to read. The subject line said, "My mother hid my entire identity from me." And as I scrolled through the first few lines, I could already feel my heart pounding. What you're about to hear is not just shocking, it's deeply personal, and it stayed with me long after I finished reading. If you're someone who believes family secrets always come to light, this story might just confirm that. But if you think some things are better left in the past, well, you might question that by the end. So before we begin, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we give voice to untold stories that deserve to be heard. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The story begins with a young woman named Danielle. She grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Oregon, raised by her single mother, June. To the outside world, they seemed like any other. Mother and daughter, private, a little reclusive, but close. Danielle always felt like her mother was guarding something, but every time she asked, June would just smile and change the subject. One weekend, Danielle returned home after years of living in another state. Her mother had recently passed away, and Danielle was sorting through the house to decide what to keep. That's when she walked into her childhood bedroom, a room that hadn't changed in over a decade. The faded wallpaper, the neatly stacked books, and the creaky old closet, all exactly as she remembered. She wasn't looking for anything in particular. But when Danielle sat on the floor, holding that photo like it was a live wire. Her hands trembled as she studied every detail, the eyes, the chin, even the way the woman tilted her head. It was like looking into a mirror from another time. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, Miriam, 1984. That name meant nothing to her. Yet, she dug deeper into the box, her breath catching with each document she uncovered. A birth certificate, not hers, but someone named Miriam Rose Collins. Same birth date, same hospital, same time, but the name completely different. Danielle felt the walls of her reality begin to crack. Was Miriam her twin, a cousin? Or was this her? Among the papers was a letter, yellowed and folded so many times it was barely holding together. It was addressed to her mother from someone named Helen. In it, Helen begged June not to go through with it. "You promised me she'd grow up knowing the truth," it said. "She deserves to know who she is, and who her real parents are." Danielle's pulse raced out. She reread the letter, hoping she had misunderstood. But the message was clear. June had taken her from someone, perhaps even adopted her without telling her. The next morning, Danielle didn't sleep. She sat upright in bed, the box of secrets resting beside her like a bomb waiting to go off. She didn't know what to do. Confront June? Search public records? Or pretend she never saw any of it and keep living her carefully crafted life? But pretending felt impossible now. She got up, opened her laptop, and typed the name Miriam Rose Collins into every search bar she could find. At first, there was nothing. Then one result pinned. Back a birth announcement from a small town paper in 1984. Same date, same hospital, but the parents listed were Helen and Peter Collins. Her world tilted again. It wasn't just an odd coincidence. Her phone buzzed. It was her fiancé asking if she wanted to meet for lunch. She ignored it. She couldn't face anyone yet, not until she knew what she was dealing with, not until she figured out who she really was. She searched for Peter and Helen Collins. Both had passed away years ago. No siblings listed, no other children. Just Miriam, who seemingly vanished after birth. Danielle closed the laptop and stared at the photo again. The more she looked at it, the more it felt like a memory, not just an image. She had flashes, quick, scattered impressions of someone, singing a lullaby that wasn't June's voice, of a different smell, a different home. Were they real, or was her June sat down at the table like a weight had just been dropped on her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the letter. "I was hoping you'd never see this," she said, her voice cracked with age and regret. "I was going to tell you someday, I just didn't know how." Danielle stared at her, jaw clenched. "Tell me what?" June looked her in the eyes. "You were never meant to be mine," she whispered. "Your mother, Helen, was my younger sister. She died in a car accident when you were only 6 months old. There was a custody battle, my husband and I. We weren't approved to adopt you officially, but I couldn't let you go into the system." Danielle recoiled like she'd been slapped. "You kidnapped me?" she said, voice rising. June flinched but didn't respond. "You let me grow up believing you were my mother, all while lying to me my entire life." June reached out, but Danielle pulled away. "I did it because I loved you. I am your mother in every way that counts." Danielle stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. Her breath came in fast bursts, panic setting in. Her childhood, her memories, everything was suddenly drenched in shadow. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she said, pacing. "Do I have other family? Do they know I exist? Have they been looking for me?" June started crying. "There's no one left," she said. "After Helen died, Peter disappeared. No one came for you. No one even called." Danielle drove aimlessly through town, tears blurring her vision. Every familiar street now felt foreign. How could something so massive be hidden from her for decades? Her fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly as her mind raced. "Helen," she whispered, "my real mother. I don't even remember her." She pulled into the parking lot of a local park and sat in silence. Children played in the distance. Parents called their names with laughter. Danielle felt like a ghost among the living. Her entire identity had just shifted, and she didn't know how to exist in this new version of reality. Her hands shook as she dialed a number. She called her best friend, Tricia. "You need to meet me," Danielle said. Her voice cracked. "Now." Tricia didn't hesitate. Within minutes, she arrived and climbed into the passenger seat, taking one look at Danielle's tear-streaked face before asking, "What happened?" Danielle handed her the letter, unable to speak. Tricia read silently, her eyebrows rising, then furrowing. "Holy, Danny, this is huge." Danielle nodded. "I don't know who I am anymore. She lied to me my entire life. My birth mother died, and I didn't even know she existed. And now, I'm apparently the kidnapped niece. What do I even do with that?" Tricia sat back, stunned. "Okay, first breathe. You're still you." That night, Danielle couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the letter resting on her chest like a weight. Every word replayed in her mind. Her childhood, once filled with cozy memories of bedtime stories and school recitals, now felt like a curated fiction. How could June have lived with such a lie? The next morning, Danielle drove to the town records office. She needed to confirm if any of it was real. She gave them her name, her supposed birth date, and June's last name. The clerk typed rapidly, then frowned. "There's no birth certificate under June's name," she said. "Only one under Helen Merritt." Danielle's heart raced. "So it's true," she murmured. The clerk nodded. "You were born to Helen Merritt, but there's no record of an official adoption." Danielle stared at the document. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a full-scale cover-up. June had taken her without any legal process, driven by a desperate need for more answers. She tracked down an old neighbor of Helen's, Mrs. Langley, who still lived in the same street. When Danielle introduced herself, the woman gasped. "You're Helen's baby," she said, placing a hand over her heart. "We all thought you'd vanished." Poor Helen was devastated. Mrs. Langley invited her in and shared everything. Danielle sat alone in her car, gripping the steering wheel as waves of grief and anger washed over her. Her mother, her real mother, had died heartbroken, thinking her baby had been lost forever. And June had lived a lie for decades, never once telling the truth. Danielle felt like a stolen artifact in someone else's story. Back home, she confronted June. She held out the birth certificate and asked one simple question: why? June's face went pale. She didn't deny it. She sat slowly, as if the weight of the secret had finally caught up to her. Because I couldn't have children, she said. And when I saw you, all alone, something broke inside me. Danielle stared at her, stunned. You took me. You stole me. June nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. It was wrong, I know, but I loved you like my own. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just couldn't let you go. Her voice cracked. I convinced myself it was fate, that you were meant to be with me. But Danielle couldn't find sympathy in that moment. You didn't just hurt Helen, she whispered. You destroyed her. And you've been lying to me for my entire life. She turned away, unable to look June in the eyes. The woman she thought was her mother had become a stranger. That the police interview was surreal. Danielle sat across from two detectives, her hands trembling as she recounted the details. She showed them the documents, the photo of Helen, and the letter that revealed everything. The detectives listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances. One of them finally said, "This is going to open a 30-year-old case." Are you prepared for that? Danielle nodded. I don't want to hurt anyone unnecessarily, but the truth matters. Helen deserves that much. They took her statement, collected the documents, and said they'd begin investigating immediately. Danielle left the station feeling like she was walking through fog, part disbelief, part relief, and still haunted by the weight of what had been uncovered. The next morning, she received a call. We've opened the file, the detective said. And you were right. There was a report of a missing infant matching your details. The case went cold after a year, but it's officially being reopened. Danielle's knees buckled as she sat down. It was no longer just her private truth. It was real, legal. Official.news spread quickly through their small town. Whispers followed her at the grocery store, people staring longer than usual. That's the girl who was stolen. The trial began 6 months later, and the courtroom buzzed with tension. Danielle sat beside the prosecutor, watching as June entered in handcuffs. Their eyes met only once, June's filled with regret, Danielle's with sorrow. She didn't hate her, but she couldn't defend her either. Some things were unforgivable, even if love once masked them. Witnesses testified, nurses from the old hospital, neighbors who recalled strange details. Even the detective who had worked the original case as a young rookie. Each voice painted the same picture: a child stolen, a mother left shattered, and a woman who built a life on a foundation of lies. June didn't deny it. She only said, I loved her. Danielle was called to the stand. Her voice trembled, but she spoke with clarity. She described the confusion of growing up, the lies she never knew existed, the pain of realizing everything she believed had been false. She gave me love, Danielle said, but it wasn't hers to give. And that love came at the cost of another woman's agony. Helen sat quietly in the gallery, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Danielle glanced at her from the stand, feeling that strange ache again, that yearning to feel something familiar. Danielle tried to reconnect with Helen. At first, they met for coffee in quiet cafes, where words came slowly and silences said more than anything. Helen showed her old photos, letters from the past, and the room that had once been Danielle's. Nursery. It was a strange comfort, a life Danielle never lived, preserved like a museum. They didn't bond like mother and daughter overnight. There was no cinematic embrace, no flood of memories. Just two women sitting across from each other. trying to stitch something human out of a tragedy. Danielle appreciated Helen's patience. She never pressured, never asked for love, only offered a quiet presence when Danielle was ready. In her apartment, Danielle sat with old journals, both hers and ones June had left behind. She read about her own childhood from a woman who loved her fiercely, even if that love had been born from a crime. "You were my second chance," June had written once. "My redemption, my biggest sin, and my greatest joy." Danielle cried for her in private. She mourned the mother she had and the one she didn't get to know. She wondered who she might have become in a different life, one where June had never taken her, one where Helen had raised her. But speculation was poison. What mattered was now, and who she chose to be going forward. Helen offered to help her find. Life didn't suddenly become simple. There were nights Danielle woke up from dreams filled with two mothers, each calling her by a different name. She'd find herself saying "Mom," and not knowing which face she meant. Therapy helped, not to erase the confusion, but to give it a place to rest. A space where contradictions could live without shame. Helen remained a gentle presence. They didn't talk every day, but when they did, it felt real, honest. Danielle began to feel something like peace, not because things were fixed, but because she no longer expected them to be. She could breathe in the brokenness without suffocating. Danielle started journaling again, not to remember, but to release. She wrote letters she never sent, both to June and Helen, letters full of pain and thanks, anger and forgiveness. In those pages, she carved out her truth, not the story others told her, but the one she chose to write now. She also gave a TED-style talk at a local university on identity and resilience. Her voice trembled, but her message was clear. We are not just what happens to us, we are what we decide to do with it. Students lined up afterward to hug her, thank her, share their own 1 year later, Danielle stood in front of a modest crowd at a local bookshop. She was launching her memoir, Unwritten, Finding the Truth They Hid. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her voice. As she read aloud the opening passage, she saw tears in the eyes of strangers who somehow understood. Helen sat in the front row, clutching tissues and a copy of the book. Danielle had dedicated it to both her mothers, not to erase what happened, but to acknowledge that love and pain had lived side by side. That sometimes the truth has two faces and the heart must learn to see them both. After the reading, a young girl approached Danielle and whispered, "Your story sounds like mine." Danielle knelt down and said, "Then promise me you'll tell it too." That was the power she'd found, not in being heard, but in helping others speak. That night, back at her apartment, she lit a candle beside two framed photos, one of her as a baby in June's arms, the other taken recently, smiling beside Helen. She didn't choose the past, but she was choosing how to carry it now, not as a burden, but as a compass. Brenda's voice cracked as she finished reading Danielle's letter.